To welcome everybody. I see we've got 5 people here, so welcome Charlene, Danielle, Heidi, Jamie, and Mercedes. Glad to have you here. This is now my 4th webinar with Ride Like an Athlete. Couple of housekeeping things before we get started. This is being recorded, so if you miss anything or you want to go back because there was something you particularly liked, it should be posted on YouTube probably within like 48 hours. I'd like to be 24, but we have some very slow internet right here. I live out in the country and it tends to take 6 or 7 hours to upload after I've even had a chance to download it from the cloud. So if there's anything that you like, as I said, come back. The Ride Like an Athlete group will post the, I'll post the link there once I have it up on YouTube. Another housekeeping thing, if this is your first time in one of our Zoom meetings, there is, you'll notice down near the bottom of your screen, whether you're on a computer or on a phone, you'll see there is a Q&A and there is also a chat. I would love to hear from you in the chat, and that's for you guys talking to each other too. But if you have a question, just in case we miss it, a question that you really want answered, put it in the Q&A because I'll actually see an alert there. And then we can review it at the end too, whereas sometimes things get lost in the chat if we have a little bit of discussion. So if you have a burning question, make sure it gets into that Q&A screen instead of the chat. So I think that is all the housekeeping that I have to do. I've lost my file. There it is. Let me get back to my notes. So I want to introduce you to Karen. I'll let her go through her thing first, but I wanted to tell you why I have her here. So a while ago, I posted a poll on the Facebook group to see what you guys wanted to do as a webinar. And the one question, the one answer that somebody put out there that I didn't put out there that got upvoted real high was what to do when you don't have access to trail. And that's such a loaded question because it could be, there's so many things and it depends on your level and how much distance you want to do, and it depends on so many things. But a really good approach that I like to do is talk about ring work. And that's one thing that every endurance rider can benefit from is their training with dressage, or if you want to call it flat work or schooling or whatever you want to call it. Doing some stuff inside the ring to build your skills and your skills and your horse's strength to carry you down the trail as well. So I wanted to bring in my coach, Karen, because she is my subject matter expert on this, of what you can do outside of the trails to get your horse fit and ready for competition. So with that in mind, I will let Karen tell you a little bit about herself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Briggs. I'm a Equestrian Canada Level 2 competition coach. My focus over the years has been largely eventing and dressage, but I have gotten sucked into the endurance universe, thanks to Sarah and a few other people. And kind of dabbling in the last few years. And I also appreciate that not everybody has access to the fantastic trails that I currently have access to, but would still like to try distance riding of some kind. So my contribution to this is to provide some alternatives for conditioning a horse for distance riding if you have limited space, and also just talk a little bit about the benefits of doing some ring work. I know it's not a distance rider thing, but the benefits to yourself and your horse can make your experience on trail a whole lot more pleasant. Just, my feeling, the older I get, the more I enjoy riding a horse with nice buttons to push. And, the longer I'm in the saddle on that horse, the more buttons I want there to be. That's going to make my life a whole lot easier on trail. And that, so that's kind of my arena, is the buttons.
Cool. Okay. I kind of wanted to tell a story to everybody about mine and your first ride together. I don't know if you remember it very well, but so I met Karen, just as I just moved into a new barn near the Dufferin Forest for, it was maybe about a month before I was supposed to do the Mongol Derby.
Yeah,
And
how's that?
I had this idea that I was going to find my way over to the Dufferin Forest from this new barn. I was going to meet up with Karen because she had been coaching somebody else at this barn, and we were going to go for a ride together. And some of my incentive, a little weird as it may be, is I had driven over earlier and I put all my horse stuff too, but I put a cooler full of food there. And so when Karen drove up in her rig with her horse, I out of the bushes behind the parking lot, I pulled out a tub of fried chicken and offered her fried chicken, and I didn't scare her off. So she is well aware of how crazy endurance riders are and how weird we are. And I've been with a lot of coaches who either like, that's nice, and they kind of like grin and bear me. But Karen and I have been together for a long time ever since that. And as I said, she really knows what she puts up with my crazy at the very least, and she takes part in my crazy sometimes too. So she knows what you guys are going through here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, adventures have their own brand of crazy. And that's so
absolutely.
Not that unfamiliar to me. Slightly different brand of crazy.
Yeah, you guys definitely do things that I wouldn't want to do, and I'm sure I do plenty of things you guys don't want to do too.
I haven't been talked into 100 yet. Let's put it that way. But
No, we might get you up to a 25 this year, though.
Possibly, yes. But
maybe
you know, I've got like 20 years on Sarah, so we'll see.
Yeah, Karen's also a good resource for the our more senior riders in the group too, because she's been there and done that, and she definitely empathizes a little better than maybe I can in these things.
Yeah.
So getting into kind of the meat of our topic, as I said, it was kind of this open question of what can I do to fit up my horse? And I said there could be so many answers in there. And my first thought is, well, really, you should be talking to somebody one-on-one, because everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different, right? Not only do you have your different experience as a rider and as an athlete there, but you have your horse's different experience as well. So we kind of came up with the idea of making some avatars of people we thought might be interested in doing distance riding, and maybe if you guys wanted to introduce yourself a little bit in the chat panel as well, we might be able to touch on that. So we're going to go through our little avatars first, and then if we've got some time to just tell us a bit about your if you want us to talk about something that might work for you, a bit about your background, what your struggles are, and what your goals are as well. So our first avatar, I called her Nina Newbie, and we have determined her to be a rider from another discipline who wants to try an introductory level ride. So we're looking at, you know, maybe she's been in the ring a lot and she says, wow, this is really boring. I want to get out and see some nature. So she's looking to do maybe a 12-mile ride or a 20-kilometer ride, and just kind of wanting to see what the sport is all about. So this is Nina. And we kind of built a little bit of a training program for her too, of what she can do being, we'll say, a hunter rider who really only has access to a ring, what she can do to prepare herself for her first ride. So the first thing we wanted to look at is how often is she riding, and if and our initial thought was, if she's riding on a regular basis, which, you know, most of the people who are competing in another sport they're riding maybe 3 or 4 times a week. If she's doing 3 or 4 hours per week of walk, trot, canter, that's actually probably enough baseline fitness to do a 12-mile. So from there on, we want to start tweaking some of the smaller skills that are more applicable for the trail. From there, we can actually start working on the arena work being just like trot duration, increasing the trot duration. So I put in here a 2-minute interval work. So you could do a 2-minute trot, a 2-minute walk. Do that for about a week or so in your regular lessons. Maybe take, you know, you're schooling for an hour, take half an hour for the schooling and do half an hour for a little bit of this cardio work. And really an hour in the ring, like it seems like a lot to an endurance rider who's used to going on the trails. But if you're coming from another sport, it's not that far-fetched. And by the time you get in your warm up and you're doing several circles in several directions, it's not that hard to get an hour in 3 times a week to do that. So that's a pretty good baseline for the cardio side of it. Now, Karen, if you wanted to talk about the goals, we put in here self-carriage, long and low, build top line and form. I'm going to try to open up a video if you wanted to kind of just do a little bit of an introduction of what those goals are and what they look like. I'm going to see if I can open up this video for everyone.
Right. Okay. So I don't know which one you're opening first, but
it'll be the you on Spike doing long and low.
I hope everybody knows we're talking low. Yeah. Okay. So long and low, the basic idea is that you're encouraging your horse to stretch down and forward as you ride, and maintaining balance and rhythm. So it's an indication that your horse has some degree of self-carriage, that he's propelling himself along instead of you having to hold his face up. And he should be able to maintain a rhythm and softly swing through his back and step under himself as he's doing that.
So I've got
some
it ready,
horses
so
are comfortable with long and low legs. Okay. Yep.
There you go.
See if it works.
And now, of course, it doesn't want to load. I just tested it.
Yeah, of course.
There we go.
Is it coming through now?
Yeah, it's coming through now.
Okay.
So you should be able to see it too. Can you see it?
Not yet. Anybody else? Technology. I can keep talking about long and low.
Yeah, sure. If you want to keep talking about it.
Okay. Amy and Charlene say they can see it.
They can see it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
sorry, guys. We're still a little new to this. It's we're still figuring this out just a bit.
We both have rural internet, so you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea with long and low is your horse is stretching all those muscles along his top line, right from the pole, right behind the ears, all the way down through his back and his neck and through the hindquarters. So you're encouraging your horse to step forward and underneath himself. And by doing this work, you're also kind of building up their core so that they are better able to carry your weight over longer distances with less effort. So just as riders need strong core, horses need strong core, and that kind of work is really useful. So we got photo bombing going on.
Yeah, he's cleaning my phone for me. He's being COVID friendly. It's okay. They're still looking at the video. We still got the video going on. I still can't see
the video, but okay. All right. So there's a little bit of stretchiness going on there with Spike, I hope. I looked at it earlier. Yep. Yeah. So long and low. And then what else are we talking about?
Self-carriage while doing the long and low, and talking a little bit about building the top line. Why do we want to build the top line? What it looks like, and how long and low is helping towards that.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you're talking about all the muscles that run along your horse's spinal cord and help support your weight. And long and low is one of those early tests that you can do with practically any horse to see whether he is comfortable stretching through those muscles and comfortable carrying your weight. As he stretches down and forward, his muscles are also, he's going to round through his back, which supports your weight better. If a horse is having tremendous difficulty doing that, they either are in a situation where their back muscles are quite weak, or quite that he's dealing with some sort of a saddle fit issue, and that makes it difficult for the horse to stretch down. But there are horses who find it more difficult than others. I've had a couple of very naturally high-headed thoroughbreds in my in my history who both the current one and the previous one find it difficult to really stretch down. Horses with a little bit more of a horizontal type of a build find that exercise easier.
Now,
So
Karen, I know.
huge stretch long and low.
Oh, I was just saying, I know a lot of our riders are riding Arabs, which tend to be built more upright.
Yeah. So if your horse doesn't do an extreme stretch, don't panic. Any small amount of stretch that you can encourage is fine. And you're basically just letting the contact go, but encouraging your horse to keep a rhythm and keep coming forward from your leg. So self-carriage is one of those subjects that also, sounds very dressage, and basically what you're testing is, can your horse keep his rhythm and his balance without you having to play tug of war with it? And it's a sign that he's propelling himself from his hindquarters rather than dragging himself along on his front end. That's another thing that's really helpful for a trail horse, because that means you're going to have less fatigue on longer distances.
So I just switched over the video. So now it's the video of Westy and I.
Okay.
And so for anybody who's watching who doesn't know Westy, he's an off the track standardbred. And they live their lives in a head check. So their head is tied upright. So you can see me up in the corner. So their head is back quite a bit. And that's what helps them keep their balance while racing. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how we've been helping Westy bring his head down? Because he's been doing this for what, like 10 years now?
Yeah.
And now we're trying to retrain him out of that.
Yeah, we've been asking him to change his musculature quite a bit since he became a riding horse. And it's been an adjustment for him. This is the big spiral out video where he starts off a little unsteady in his contact, and you can see as he goes through the exercise that his contact, his reaching for Sarah's contact becomes more consistent as he goes. Now, so spiral in, spiral out, that's one of my all-time favorite exercises. I make everybody do it.
Yeah, we're going to get to that one in a little bit. We're still at the long and low video, but I did want to talk a little bit more about how the long and low affects on the trail as well.
Yeah, he's a greener horse. Yeah. He's a greener horse, so he's not quite as sure about stretching down, and that he'll attempt it for short periods, and then he wants to revert to what's familiar to him. So he'll pop up and hollow for a little while, and then he'll try to reach down into the contact again. That's totally normal. That's for his level of development right now, and that they're always going to want to revert to what they're familiar with. And that, so if your horse comes from another discipline, if he comes from racing, which a lot of the Arabs use for endurance, come from a racing background. A lot of the birds I've worked with come from a racing background as well. It's not necessarily a natural thing for them at first, but they can learn to do it. Basically what you're doing is you're encouraging forward and rhythm and straightness, and the stretching starts to come.
I also wanted to mention too is when you're going down trail, particularly as you start to get to the longer distances too, we don't like to micromanage our horses at all, right? We think of dressage and we're like, oh, well, we have to pull the horse's head and we have to tell the horse where they're putting the feet. And we don't want to have to tell the horse where to put its feet when we're going to be riding for 8 hours, right? Like that's just absolutely, totally physically and mentally draining for us. So how is this work at the long and low in the ring? How does that translate to, because I know the answer, but for everybody else, how does this help out on the trail, keeping us, keeping our endurance going as well as riders?
You froze up there a little bit, so I didn't get all of it, but basically on trail, if you've got a horse who's confident in his balance and his rhythm, he's going to have a lot more autonomy on the trail, and you can do a lot less micromanaging. And Sarah has seen my horses, they work on a contact, and they work into the bridle in their dressage work, and I ride on the buckle one-handed a lot of the time out on trail. And I'm confident that my horses are balanced enough and enough that I don't have to micromanage them out on trail, and they know how to balance themselves. That's a process, of course. You know, it doesn't come immediately, but the dressage work definitely helps with that, and it makes me feel a whole lot better about them when I tackle a difficult bit of terrain.
So if a rider is currently, let's talk about an endurance rider who's currently, they're used to go on the buckle all the time, and they're not so sure about taking up the contact, but they want to improve the horse's balance. Maybe this is a good opportunity to get into our second avatar, who is Mandy Move Up, who's ready to kind of move up for the distance, and maybe move up the speed a little bit as well. Do you want to talk about the next exercise as we go into this and kind of move back that way? Does that sound like a good?
Yeah. Sure.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna screen share again. So we had for the Mandy Move Up is that our goals are to do some lateral movement and be able to adjust the pace. But I think now, after we've kind of talked this out a little bit, I think we also want to talk about bringing up the contact and letting go the contact, when you might want to choose to be able to do both of those things, and why they're both important, as opposed to just having a horse that's always going to behave, it's always going to do, autonomous, as you said, or one that you're constantly going to micromanage. How do you find the balance between the two of those? If you want to get started, I will look for one of the videos for that, and then I'll screen share once we once I get that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, particularly if you come from a Western background, then you may not be super comfortable establishing the kind of elastic contact that dressage riders establish. From the point of view of some of the other disciplines, it can look like you're pulling your horse's face in dressage, but that's not really what's going on. What's really going on when you put a horse on the bit, or in a frame, or riding on contact, or riding them round, whatever you want to call it. There are different expressions for it depending on the discipline you come from, but it all amounts to the same thing. You're riding from leg to hand, not the other way down, round. So you're not asking your horse to pull his face in towards his body. You're pushing the energy from your leg forward into this receiving hand. And that's the essential thing that is important to understand about that. Creating activity in the hindquarters, which is the engine, and then you're regulating it with your hands. So it's useful to be able to experiment with riding your horse on a contact. It's not necessarily something that you're going to do a lot on trail, but there are going to be circumstances where you have to be able to take a feel and have your horse accept that and be able to work with it, instead of, I've seen a lot of endurance horses who are really afraid of contact. And that can be difficult when you're in a situation where you do have to micromanage for a few minutes. So first thing I would suggest is that at least you do at least some of your ring work in a very mild bit, a snaffle, so that you can take that contact and teach your horse not to be afraid of it. If you have something with a lever action to it, a curb or a long shanked hackamore or anything like that, then some horses will back off and be afraid of that contact. It would be hard to establish that trust with your horse. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that every distance horse is going to be rideable out on trail in a snaffle. A lot are, but some may need more than that to be able to reason with them. But at least in your ring work, it's useful to be able to get them comfortable with and going well in a snaffle, so that you can take that contact and have the contact be elastic and mild enough that they learn to accept it and work into it.
Now, before we get into the
dressage, you're kind of working towards, yeah. Sorry,
you're cutting out. I thought you were done, but it was just cutting out. But I wanted, so we do have a question that I thought this might be a good opportunity for, talking about greener horses and using like lunging and using a surcingle and a lunge line. Would you attempt to do that in a saddle, or would you do it on the lunge line? Is there a lot of value in training? And I thought this could go, they were asking about long and low, but this would also be, I think, a good question about accepting contact versus, versus going long and low too. So how
Yeah.
would you recommend that they do lunge work? Do you recommend that it's mostly in saddle? What are the benefits to doing both of those?
Well, it'll depend partly on it may be that lunging is your only option for a while. You know, lunging can be valuable, and it can be a good way to teach a horse to accept contact. I'm not a big gadget person. I'm not a fan of the vast majority of gadgets out there. So you'll never see me recommending draw reins or German martingales or any of that stuff. The one gadget that I do think is valuable in training is a set of elastic side reins. So whether your side reins are just a piece of plastic in them or the rubber donut kind,
Oh, sorry, we
we
lost Karen a little bit there.
I'm back.
I think you're
Are you back?
I'm back. I've always been here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sorry. So we were just at about rubber donut.
Yeah. Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So side reins, you're lunging or single or side reins or saddle and side reins. You can set them fairly long so your horse has to reach for the contact. But the lovely thing about side reins is that they provide an elastic contact that never goes away. So your horse can kind of play around with it and find his comfort zone within that contact and get more comfortable with it. So that can be really useful for a green horse. To just kind of let them go around in the circle and mess around with the contact. Why am I muted? Okay, am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
I think it's still just more. I can hear you. I think it's still just internet issues here.
Yeah, probably. It's important that your side reins are not too short, that you're not forcing your horse into a frame when you're using that. They should be long enough so that he has to kind of reach forward for the contact. You can also do that under saddle. You don't have to do it on the lunge line. You can teach a horse to accept contact while you're out riding in a ring or when you're riding out a trail. You can do it anywhere, but you do have to have elastic contact coming from your arms too. The reins themselves have no stretch, so the stretch and the give has to come from you. Anytime you're setting your hands or locking your elbows, I'm too close to my laptop to really give you the full physical demo here. Yeah, wall. And that,
so,
but
elastic
if you're
elbows,
locking your elbows, thank you. There,
elbows. Elastic.
There we go. Lock elbows makes contact. Lock, and cocked wrists make rigid contact that doesn't give. Neither of those is going to work. So it has to be elastic coming right from your shoulders all the way through your arms and be able to follow your horse's mouth. Okay, so that's something that most beginner riders practice early on, is following the horse's the motion of the horse's head. Right at the trot, the horse's head is fairly stationary. At walk and canter, there's a lot of movement that we have to follow.
And I think it's valuable to say here too is even if you're not a green rider, if you're used to not being on contact, you're green in this sense is you're green to the contact too, right? So you may not have those muscle memory built up there to be able to follow. So taking the side reins takes you out of the equation so the horse can learn it itself, and then maybe it's something that you can learn on a schoolmaster or something as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not sure side reins, then seek some advice from a coach or somebody in your barn who has worked with them before. And that longer is better than shorter. So there'll come a point where they're so long that they're not doing anything, but you want to start there and kind of take them in little by little and keep the sessions short as well, because the other thing that's important to remember is if you're teaching your horse this and you're asking him to do this for the first time, we're saying, this is a green horse. He has not used those muscles that way before. And like any other new exercise, any new muscle group, first you got to build it up gradually. And that goes right back to conditioning, right? and that you can't just ask them to do 45 minutes on the lunge line starting from nothing. And that because they're not only going to get sore, they're going to resent you for it, and they're going to remember it. Horses have really long memories.
Yeah.
You want to make this a positive experience.
Especially Arabs, it seems. So we did go off on a bit of a tangent there, and I do have the video of the next exercise. So if we wanted to kind of go back, do you want to refresh our memory as to this is the spiral in, spiral out, when we would introduce this, and why we're introducing this to the riders, and also if you could just touch on too how long you would do this exercise for too, because we are looking to fill up basically an hour of riding time as well. This is kind of the you know, how to pass the time for the conditioning miles as well too.
Right.
So this is kind of our hour's worth of
so yeah,
work.
exercise. Yeah, fingers crossed. You can do it a walk, trot, or canter. You can start with walk with a really green horse, even one that isn't, you know, super steerable yet, can start to learn the spiral in, spiral out exercise. And it's basically you start on a large circle, you gradually come in on the circle, and then you gradually go out on the circle. So you're taking your time with it. You're spiraling in very slowly. You're making each circle just a tiny bit smaller than the one before. And it accomplishes a lot of things. It sounds very simple and that, but it accomplishes a lot of things. It's teaching your horse basically leg yield, which is the first type of lateral work that you want to teach horses. And even if you have absolutely no interest in ever competing in dressage, it's still useful to teach your horse a little bit of lateral work, a little bit of sideways, because you're teaching your horse basically to move off your leg. And you never know when you might have to position his shoulders or position his hindquarters somewhere specific out on trail. You might have to open a gate without getting that. I'm 5'2" and I have one horse who's 16.3. I'm not getting off him if I don't absolutely have to. And that's so it's because then I have to go and find a stump or something to stand on to get back on the bugger. That's so it's very useful to be able to move your horse off your leg. And this is a basic exercise that can start to teach your horse that without it being so intense that he gets resentful about it. And that's so basically as the circle gets smaller, you're leg yielding in, you're using your outside foot smaller and smaller on the circle, and then on the spiral out part, you're using your inside leg to push your horse away and larger. So he's working the outside hind leg on the spiral in, has to step further under his body and carry more of his weight and flex more and push more. As he spirals out, it's the inside hind leg that you're working. So he's going to have to step further under his body with that leg and push and carry. And that's so you're building top line, you're building strength, and it also is teaching your horse to bend around your leg. It's also a useful exercise for identifying asymmetries in yourself and in your horse. As you spiral in on the exercise, depending on your horse's strength and his flexibility and just, you know, how far along he is in his training, there will come a point on the spiral in where he will start to struggle to maintain the curve of the circle. And horses basically do one of 3 or 4 things when that happens. They will either drop behind your leg and lose the rhythm and get slower. They will get a little worried and increase their rhythm, or they will start to swing their quarters out because they can't maintain that amount of bend. That's the point at which
I have one more.
One more.
I have one more because we're watching the video right now and it's about to happen on the next circle.
Yeah.
With Westy, and let's see
he did that little canter hop.
You can see it.
Yeah.
And he does the little canter hop.
That's his little ouch.
There it is.
Hard. Yeah.
That's too small. And then we wanted to share the video of when we got a little too small.
Right.
It's like, okay,
and you'll see
now
in
it's
that
time
video
to
as well.
out.
He ducks behind the contact a couple of times too, especially on the spiral out. That's an evasion on his part. He's trying to find his balance, and that this is, you know, bending is a fairly new thing for him too. He never had to bend when he was between the shafts of a jog cart as a racehorse. So he's doing awesome learning it, and that, but sometimes he finds it hard. And that's, so you can see he's more consistent on the out as he spirals out. And that, so when you do the exercise, you can start at a walk, you can get quite small. At the trot, and especially at the canter, you would not spiral in nearly as much, especially with a greener horse. As your horse gets stronger and more flexible side to side and everything, you can start to push it down. So with my more advanced horse, I will go from like a 20-meter circle right down to a 10 or even an 8-meter circle, which they call a volte in dressage, and then spiral back out. So I'm just paying attention to the rhythm of the trot or the canter or the walk, and attention to the signs that my horse may be finding, you know, his limit as the circle gets smaller. And then as I spiral out, my goal is to keep the rhythm and try.
Oh, we've lost Karen there briefly. I will take over as best as I can. Oh no, she's back. I didn't have to take the video.
Okay. And
all right, you're back.
Yes.
I'm
back.
So I think we were just talking about the spiral out.
Yeah, by the time you finish the spiral out, if it's been working correctly with your horse and your horse has been maintaining the curve of the circle, you should find that the gait gets a little bigger and swingier, that he's covering more ground with less effort, and that's, so it actually improves the quality of the gait if your horse has been doing the exercise correctly. My internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, and so when we were just talking about improving the quality of the gait too, that's obviously important for the endurance riders, because we want to see efficient gaits, and we want to them to move down the trail with kind of the greatest speed for the greatest ease, right? We want them to have those gaits and make it easy for them too. So I'm just going to play this video one more time. You can see we're getting smaller, and then if you're watching before we go back out, you'll see that he actually opens up his stride just a little bit before I ask for the walk, when he's down along the fence line. So I think we've got,
and his contact is, you know, he ducks behind the contact every now and then, but then he reaches for it again, which is lovely. There you go. And yeah, you should start to feel your horse swing through his back more, and just cover more ground with less effort. And then again, that is a very, very useful thing fitness-wise for any kind of distance horse. And that's, so strength and pushing power from the hindquarters, learning.
So there you can see right
from
there
behind, drag themselves along on their front end. Yeah.
Like, there he was right there. And that's when we gave him the break. We said, good job.
Yeah. No, exactly. If your horse is giving you good results like that, best thing you can do is, you know, let them have a breather. Sarah likes to let her horses drop their heads down and have a few mouthfuls of grass. So,
it's their treat.
Yep.
Other disciplines don't do it, but endurance riders, sure, why not?
Yep. So, yeah, so that's an exercise that pretty much everybody can incorporate into their flat work sessions. And it's not something you necessarily want to drill, you know, for hours at, but I would at least, you know, if you do a spiral in, spiral out on the left rein, do one on the right rein. So you're always trying to work the body in a symmetrical way.
And in our lessons, we tend to do kind of 3 or 4 ins and outs total each direction.
Depends on your horse's fitness level.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something that's pretty easy to kind of eat up some time with, and gives you a bit of focus too, right? Because I know a lot of times you walk into the ring and you've got absolutely no plan. So go in with this as a plan. You've just eaten up, probably with your rest and everything in between. You could even get up to 10 minutes on this, I'd say, by doing a walk and trot, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
And you know, if we're talking that you only have to do maybe 3 hours, 4 hours a week, that's quite a large portion of that too. Yeah. So yeah,
did you want to talk about the short and lengthen, the rubber band horse?
Sure, we can do the rubber band horse next. I'll let you get talking about that, and I'll cue up the video while you explain a little bit about that.
Okay, so this is another standard exercise that I do with my horses in all three gaits, but especially in trot and canter. I'm a little less likely to do it in walk, only because it's a gait that is you can muck it up doing too much shortened walk and that, but I find it really useful, especially at trot and canter, to ask my horses to move forward from my leg and open up their stride and stretch out, and then be able to softly come back to me without yanking my arms out of their sockets, and sit down behind and shorten their stride. So when we're doing this, we're asking them to keep the same rhythm, but change the length, change the amount of ground that they cover. And that's so, and again, this is something that can be done from a fairly green horse on, but at its most advanced level, it becomes true collection and true extension in a dressage horse. We don't necessarily need that level of intensity for a trail horse, but again, you know, having some adjustability in your gaits is going to be really useful on the trail, not only for adjusting for different kinds of change, but also perhaps adjusting for you know, a partner that you may be riding with whose horse has a longer or shorter stride than your horse's. That's so if you want to stay with that partner, then I mean, I'm doing that all the time because Sarah horses book it down the trail, and my guys have to struggle to keep up a little bit. That's so. I don't. Is the video is going to behave itself?
The video's going. Yeah, it's
oh, is it? Oh, there it is.
And Spike doing the trot. Yeah. So right now he's doing the little trot.
Yeah, finest hour. But you can see a little bit of what I basically think of as little trot as I'm going around. So I'm holding with my shoulders. Yeah, I'm holding with my shoulders a little bit. I'm holding with my legs. So my horse is almost kind of sitting on my leg a little bit, and I'm just kind of restricting the forward motion just a little bit. It's kind of like riding with parking brake on a bit. And then you soften everything and let your horse gradually, softly swing forward and get bigger and get back. So yeah, so this is, again, you can do it in canter, you can do it in trot, depending on what your horse's natural, you know, where he's most comfortable. My guys are thoroughbreds, so sometimes they learn this more easily in canter than they do trot. But it gives you a bit of an idea of how you can squish the trot together, okay, or the canter, and then open up the stride while keeping faster or slower.
So I can show the canter video too. I've got the Bentley canter video.
Oh yeah.
To see what it looks like in canter.
Okay. Yep.
I've lost it. There it is.
Okay.
So here's the Bentley canter, and Bentley doesn't do anything but canter now. So it is the Bentley way of doing things. You try to teach him something. He's an opposite horse. You try to teach him something and walk and move it up. It doesn't work that way. You teach him a canter and you move it down for him. He likes to be the opposite.
Quite happy to do a canter. Yeah. This particular night, he wasn't super keen on bending around your leg. But he was adjusting his stride.
So we've got the little canter going on there.
Yep. So, and when you're shortening the stride, you're thinking about compressing, but keeping your horse kind of uphill. So you don't want him to get so on his forehand that he's pulling your arms out of their sockets. You want it to be coming from behind and in front of you every stride. So that's goes back to the basic dressage principle. Spike's photobomb there.
Yeah.
The basic principle of it's coming from the engine in the back, coming forward into your hand. So these are basic exercises that I think any trail horse would benefit from. And if the word dressage scares you just call it flat work or ring work or whatever. And you don't even have to do it in a ring. You can do it in a hayfield. Just maybe scout for groundhog holes first.
Yeah, so the other thing too is you can actually do it on trail when you're, if you're schooling on trail, you can actually, practice doing a couple strides of the shortened and then a couple strides of the longer. Trail at some point is naturally going to do that for you anyway, because there's going to be certain terrain challenges where you may want to shorten your stride. If you're trying to get around roots, or maybe you're going a little bit downhill, you're going to want that shorter stride, but then you're going to want to open up as you go down in a nice flat straightaway, or maybe you're coming into a turn and you got to collect it up a little bit, and you want to bring them back to you and get them back on your leg again too. You want to maybe talk about that and doing your turns and how kind of that maneuverability of from both the spiral in exercise and the elastic band trot and canter, how those translate to some of the more technical trail?
Yeah, sure. Well, like I say, it's very useful to be able to position your horse's shoulders and position his hindquarters where you need them to be for a particular piece of terrain. So if you're working a gait, or you need your horse to move sideways so that you can avoid something on trail, or you could be navigating a narrow trail at the edge of a cliff. Even the Coat Creek used to have that one section there that was, there was a serious drop off on the one side of the trail. And if your horse is the type who swings his hindquarters, and that you could get yourself in some trouble fairly quickly. So that's where lateral work can be a really useful thing. And again, I know it's, for a lot of distance riders, that's getting into scary territory dressage wise and that. But if you think of it just in terms of being able to position your horse, then lateral work just becomes something that's useful to do. I also find it's also something that can just be an attention getter when my horse is not really focusing on what I'm asking him to do. So my one horse, I do take hunting occasionally, and he can get a little on the muscle in the hunt field. If he gets a little too wound up about everything, I just put him into shoulder in for a few strides, just even in the middle of a dirt road somewhere when the entire hunt field is following the master. If he's getting a little rude with me, I put him into shoulder in for a few strides. Yeah, Mom, I got it. Yeah, shift my weight on my hindquarters, get off your hands, behave myself. So it can be just for that. So
yeah, I've got a video for that. Do you want to show the shoulder in video?
You can show the shoulder in, haunches in thing, yeah.
Yeah,
again, this is not necessarily something every trail horse needs to learn, but it just can kind of show you where you can develop it if you're interested.
Yeah, and I've always used it too. If you get passed by somebody and your horse wants to take off, I've heard a lot of turn them to face the other way or walk backwards down the trail or whatever. Yeah. I found this is kind of more of a attention getter than any of that, because you're still moving forward, you're still making progress on the trail. The horse is still kind of getting where he wants to do, but you're giving him something else to focus on other than the horse who's, he's eating the dirt of at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very useful for that. So yeah, even if you have no intention of ever getting a 20x40 dressage ring, it can be a useful skill to have. And that. So have you got the shoulder in running? Because I'm still seeing Bentley.
Yeah, it should be showing Spike doing shoulder in.
Okay, all right. It hasn't done that yet. Maybe if I put that, it will, or not. Okay. Anyway, I did watch it earlier, and yeah, it gives you a little bit of an idea of how you can develop the lateral work.
So if somebody's not used to shoulder in, how would they start developing that? How would they cue it as a rider? And then how, is it something that the horse is naturally going to pick up on, or is there something kind of a little bit more that you have to do?
Some horses figure it out very easily. Others really struggle with it at first. A lot of my thoroughbreds, again, much like Sarah's standard bred, my guys came from a background of galloping in a straight line. So bending around my leg to that degree did not necessarily come naturally. A lot of Arabians, those who are riding Arabs, they're naturally pretty wiggly creatures, and they generally find this quite easy to learn. If you're sitting on a quarter horse or something like that, some of them really resist it at first. But I'm making stereotypes here. They're going to be individual.
Oh, we lost Karen very briefly. I'll take this opportunity then just kind of explain what's going on. So you can see as she's going down the one side, she's starting with the shoulder in, which is where the shoulder, the front two legs are moving off the track. You can see she's along the track, and then she'll move that off. And then she's doing, now you can see there's hunches in where the back legs are off. So it's a matter of positioning the body. It's the same bend, but it's positioning the body in the way that you want to. And I see Karen's back now, so she can get back onto the where she was. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is, if you want to get your horse doing these moves, it's probably best to work with a coach. The idea is basically you're creating about the same amount of bend that you would have as if you were starting a 10-meter circle. So imagine you were starting riding a little 10-meter circle in the corner, and you start a second circle. Your horse's front feet have left the track and have just started the circle. The hind feet have not gotten off the track yet. And then you take that amount of bend and you kind of push it down the wall or the fence line instead. And that, so, we can talk a lot about how your horse should be on 3 tracks and blah, blah, blah. But, that's a whole dressage lesson in itself. We don't want to scare everybody off here. But yeah, the amount of bend in shoulder in and the amount of bend in haunches in are essentially the same. It's just it's a matter of where you are positioned relative to the fence line. Am I disappearing again? Oh no, just the video.
No, I'm
Okay.
putting up the rusty one because I think I tried to do it with the circle on this and a little background. So when we started doing this with Westy, I kind of just did it. Usually when you're training the greenie, you start with a circle and then you kind of just continue the circle in feel, but you're actually going straight. Because I didn't train Westy to do this, he was very confused about why I was doing the circle. I wanted to do it for demonstration, so you don't really get a proper shoulder in here, but you kind of get the idea. You see he's walking in, but really we should be straight.
He's real, and this is very, very typical of a greener horse. Yeah, this is him trying to figure it out, which is absolutely fine. And you can see Sarah's doing it just really simply in walk. And to begin with, if you get 2 or 3 strides, say, hey, fabulous, thank you very much, I'm going to stop asking. That's the best reward you can give them, is take the pressure off. So it's something that you can just kind of introduce in little dribs and
He's
drabs.
got a little bit right there.
A little bit.
He did do a little bit there.
Yeah.
And the try is good too, because if he's moving off my leg, I'm pretty happy because it's not going to kneecap me on any trees, and that's my ultimate goal in getting him to do this kind of stuff. It's good party tricks, but yeah, keeping my knees off the trees is top priority here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, it's just a bit of education in moving away from the leg. Leg yields, like you do in the shoulder in shoulder, or the spiral in, spiral out, is the easiest bit of lateral work. Shoulder in and haunches in and that are a little more advanced, and then you can get into super fancy stuff like canter pirouettes, but very few trail horses are really going to need that.
I would love to see one. I was going to do,
it's just,
there's the one here where we were doing it on the circle. Which actually seemed to be easier for Westy, and that's another alternative that maybe we could talk about before we close up the
and again,
discussion.
When you're working with a coach, they can help figure out what's going to work best for your horse, because they're not all going to respond to the same exercises in the same way. Sometimes you have to get a little creative to figure out what is going to make the exercise more inviting for your particular horse, and that not everybody follows the rule book. So yeah, I think the basic take-home message on this is it's useful for every distance horse to get at least a little flat work schooling. working with a coach periodically so that you're not only installing some buttons on your horse, but also when you've got someone on the ground coaching you, they can help you spot, simple things like your horse weaker side. How can you help develop that weaker side so that your horse is symmetrical? When your horse is symmetrical, he's going to be able to push you down the trail more comfortably and more evenly. And again, it's all about less effort, more result. Asymmetries in the rider, same deal. If you are much stronger on one side than the other, a coach on the ground can help you spot that and work on it. And that's so that you are not a tremendous burden to your horse on the trail. I have seen some endurance riders who are very, very one-sided themselves, like a 25-degree angle all the way down the trail. How much more pressure is that putting on one side of that horse's spine than the other? That's just going to create a whole lot of fatigue. And the longer you're in the saddle, the worse it gets for your poor horse. And so just making sure that you are symmetrical is part of dressage. And that making you aware of your asymmetries and able to feel when it's happening and correct it. And so you're going to be.
And that ties in so nicely with the webinar I just did on Wednesday too.
Yeah, no, exactly. So you also wanted to cover things like just tracking your rides when you're riding in an arena or you have limited space to get your horse conditioned for trail. So talking about watches and other kinds of apps and other stuff that can help you track your horse's fitness.
Yeah, so we've gone through the 4 exercises here, and as I said, so we had our Nina Nubio, who is our avatar number 1, and we said as long as she's doing a good 3 to 4 hourly rides a week, and then maybe do 1 long ride a week, which would maybe be a 2-hour ride, she'd probably be ready for that 12-mile 20K intro ride. So just as I go back through my notes here, her goals would be self-carriage, long and low, build the top line and form. And all these exercises are going to do that. And between these 4 exercises, so you can see, like, it looks like we're kind of doing them straight off, but in between there, we're good kind of just walking around for 5 minutes, letting them stretch, and that in between. So between all those, add in a 10-minute warm up and, a 5-minute cool down. You've got your full hour there. Now, Karen, I know you wanted to talk a little bit. Karen's got a great analogy of what the dressage work is like for the horses. It's like doing squats. She always reminds me, Sarah, it's like doing squats. Your horse is not used to these muscles too, right? So not only are we taking a break after we do each one of these exercises before we move on to another exercise, we also wouldn't do this every single day of the week. We're not going to do this 7 days a week. So 3 to 4 days is fine. And if you don't have access to trail, you can very well prepare for a 12-mile intro ride. There are going to be things that you're going to see on an intro ride that you can't prepare in a ring. And that will be things like the terrain. I know a lot of people always ask, how do I train for hills if there are absolutely 0 hills in my area? And that's where we start, where we say, well, you can do
part of the world
dressage as well. Yeah.
So, yeah,
they're probably from Windsor, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the Netherlands may be flatter, but
okay. So yeah, just these exercises will also, because the hills are help building the back muscles, they're help building the strength in the hindquarters, which are the engine, right? And that's what we use the hills for. It's a kind of a nice, easy way for us to build that muscle. The dressage is definitely harder, but it does get the same effect. Am I right there? We're on the right track?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you have hills, by all means, avail yourself of them on that. But it is possible to condition a horse for, for a distance ride without hills. You're probably just going to have to put, a few more miles on than you would if you've got some hills to climb.
Yeah.
So
all of these exercises are going to build those butt muscles as well, which will help you get up the hills later too. So I know that's, as I said, every single clinic I've been to, somebody asks that question. So I thought I would address it here. And in my notes, I also said, yeah, that we would want to do a long ride once a week, which would be your long, slow distance day. And that you'd want to do mostly walking. And what you're going to want to do, your focus on that is to find different surfaces too, because if your horse is used to the ring all the time, it's gonna have never encountered things like tree roots or maybe a little bit of road or gravel or maybe deep sand. So if you can find anywhere to go, and even if it's just, walking up and down the driveway, going from grass to sand somewhere, setting up some poles so that they have to watch their feet, and get them picking up their feet as well. Have them practice that. You can kind of bring a little bit of the trail aspect into your ring as well. And sometimes it just takes getting creative and kind of looking at the property you have and saying, okay, can I go around this paddock here? Are there maybe any internal roads, where you walk out to go to the paddock? Have you got
a hay field that you can go around the perimeter of at least, or vary it a little bit? And the as far as poles go, a coach can help you figure out the spacing between trotting or cantering poles and that, but you can also just kind of put some down randomly and play, pick up sticks with them. They don't have to be at any particular distance, and just ask your horse to pick their way through those poles. Just at a walk, if you're doing it, that way.
Don't make it too hard on them.
Please don't try to trot. Let your horse think about where he's putting his feet and figure it out. And that can be really useful for just teaching them, how to handle their feet in uneven terrain, especially if you're coming from a discipline where you are, you spend your whole life in a manicured, perfectly flat, perfectly dragged ring, and there's never any challenges there. If you suddenly throw your horse out into a conservation area and ask him to deal with rocks and terrain and all of that stuff, he's in for a rude shock. And that's so you can simulate a lot of those situations if you're creative.
And that goes too for, maybe you're experienced at, helping your horses over the road. And we've got a cat breaking into my stuff in the back. Sorry.
You need to go deal with that?
I do, actually. Get out of here. Go. We're kitty sitting another one.
Okay.
So even if you're, even if you're well versed and you know how to kind of micromanage your horse so that it can get over, the roots, and you can place the feet where you want, and all of that. Maybe your horse is greener. Westy came off the track. He's only ever been on, the hard packed gravel the whole time too, right? So I would have to take a step back from what I'm used to doing, even though I'm confident that I can pick him up and kind of put him where I want to. And bring him back and retrain him to go over all that too, right? Because he's not always going to pick the best way. My best example of working with that through him was the ice. Bentley has always been a very good leader for Westy, and most of the time Westy will follow, but he's always going to be a bit of a racehorse, right? And he says, ooh, there's a gap, I can pass, right? And then he'll go out and he'll hit that patch of ice that Bentley was, very cautiously avoiding. And he goes all Bambi all over the place. And I try to pick him up and all that. But he was so sure. And he just never seemed to quite get that. He finally got it this year, but it took a year of him trying to pass too. So another thing you want to consider too is, if they're coming from another environment, what have they kind of mentally trained? Are they going to try to pass like that? And are they going to be able to handle the footing to pass it? We still won't bushwhack the same with Westy that we will with Bentley.
No.
How are you tailoring your riding to suit the different horses too?
How am I tailoring it? Yeah. Okay. Well, you want them to develop some autonomy on trail. And that's so sometimes you have to let them kind of figure it out. That just being patient with them, introducing them ideally, you know, gradually to more intense questions on training. And I'm in a similar situation with an off-the-track thoroughbred I have, who started on trail about the same time that Westy did and had similar issues. So he has learned to handle himself much, much better out on trail than he started out with. He's gotten smarter as he's going. That his biggest problem now is that he's never not going to be 16.3. So sometimes, you know, some of these trails with lumps and things, he's not the ideal horse for that sort of thing. And that,
Yeah.
but he's gotten much wiser, and I think that's just been mileage and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I was trying to say about with the ice and that too is that, you know, if they've been doing it for so long, you're going to have so long before they kind of break that habit as well too.
Oh yes.
I honestly found that Bentley was easier to terrain train than Westy was, because Bentley had never had the experience of, oh, this is always going to be perfect for me.
Right. Yeah.
So we have a question too that relates back to the Cavaletti, and I think it kind of goes along with the terrain a little bit as well. But it's more geared towards simulating hills. Do we recommend ground poles or raised Cavaletti as part of the workout to help simulate the hills, or is dressage alone enough? When would you maybe use a Cavaletti, or for what reason would you train with Cavaletti and the poles beyond just watching the feet?
Okay. Great question. Now, the term Cavaletti just means little jumps of like a foot high or less, and that a lot of the times horses are going to trot over them, but they're raised off the ground, and that's so not enough to actually stimulate an actual jump, and that, but not poles lying straight on the ground either. So Cavaletti and poles can definitely help work the hindquarters, encourage your horses to balance, and that, so they're an option. If you don't have them, don't freak out. It's fine, but they can be really useful. And yeah, I would imagine they would simulate hills to some extent. They're definitely going to help with strength and agility, and just getting your horse thinking about where he's putting his feet. And that, so there are hundreds and hundreds of different Cavaletti exercises all over YouTube, and that your coach will probably tap into. It is important to be able to space your poles evenly so that you're setting your horse up for success, not for failure. So if you don't have them spaced correctly for his stride length, he can get himself in trouble. And that's so if you're not sure about that, work with the coach. It can help you figure out the distances that and the exercises that are going to be most useful on that. So I incorporate that kind of work into my flat work quite routinely. If I'm riding in an area where I have a few pole exercises set up, I will just kind of incorporate them as I go. Little shoulder in. Oh, look, here's 3 trotting poles. Go through the 3 trotting poles, not in shoulder in, I hope, but straighten out, go through the trotting poles, and then go back to shoulder in. That, so it can be a very useful addition to your program, and it's also, let's face it, helpful that even if jumping is not really on your radar, I figure any decent trail horse should be able to hop over a little deadfall out in the woods, because sometimes there's no way around them.
Yeah, we've had it before where they've come down trail.
Yeah.
They don't always come down over the night. Sometimes they happen between loop 1 and loop 2.
Yeah.
Things are not as they were before. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been known to happen. So I think any competent trail horse should be able to jump a small deadfall out in the woods. And that's a great way to simulate that.
And it's important for the rider to also be able to do that, so that they're not pulling on or catching the horse's mouth when they do it too. So it's nice to be able to simulate that in a controlled environment.
Riders who were really, really intimidated at the idea of jumping something. And it's really not that scary. It's like anything else. It's just something you have to get comfortable with.
Yeah. And I can speak for that because I still get a little nervous at anything that's over 2 feet high. And Karen will attest to that because I'll be like, let's take the other trail. There's a deadfall on this one sometimes. Like the 2-footer, I'm like, yeah, I can do that. If it's like a little bit over 2 feet, I'm like, I don't know about this. So yeah, it's
Okay.
pretty common with endurance riders. Even if you're, you know, so bold as to ride on the edge of the cliff, you still see that little 2 foot you have to get your feet up above, and you're like, ooh, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Like I have to leave the ground.
Yeah. So we're at
So
8:20 now, so we should.
yeah, I just wanted to wrap up a couple of other things. So when we moved on to our Avatar 2, which was moving up to 25 miles, there was a few other things that I wanted to touch on. You know, all these exercises are still fantastic, and like I think everybody should be doing it, whether you're doing, you know, 12 miles or 100 miles, because obviously we want to build that good strong back for the horse. And you know, Karen will attest that, you know, I do my ring work, and especially now we're under quarantine, and that we're spending more time doing ring work because it's, you know, the safe thing that we can do close to home, and we're trying to minimize our risks right now too. So we're like, all right, let's work on this ring work, and we're going to get really good at this and that. But there are some, when you start wanting to move up more miles, you do need more trail. And I know the whole main question of this is how can you start moving up with less trail. Something I wanted to share is I actually trained for my first 50 on what is essentially showgrounds, and it's all just a whole bunch of like Grand Prix and Derby rings and stuff like that. So I actually was going to show you a Google Earth video, Google Earth shot of it. So I'm just going to share my screen here, and you can see this is where I trained for my first 50, this little patch right here, which is actually almost 200 acres, which sounds like a lot until you're training for 50-mile race. So what I would do is we would go around I would go around. So this here is an internal road here. And then we had this up here as a hay field. And then this would be, I think, like the Derby ring. And that was the jumper ring, and then there were some trees planted here, and we actually had this was a little orchard back here, and if I could sneak my way up, I could even get up here, and all the city people because this is near the city, all the city people who would drive by, never seen horses, would stop and take pictures and honk their horn at me, so didn't go there a lot. So what I would basically do is, and it sounds very tedious, and it was, but I got it done. I did a 25-mile ride here one day as my training ride. And I would loop around, I would do the whole interior road, and then I would go and I would do it the other way. And then I would go out and I could do, you know, one loop around this ring and one loop around that ring, and one loop around that ring. And then I'd go each direction again and again and again. And I would just do all these loops on these little rings here. Back and forth, and then around the hayfield. And sometimes, you know, you can do serpentines up in between them because, you know, there's paths in between these rings and that too. I would go down here into this orchard here, and you can just kind of see that there's some trees here. They're apple trees, so they were really great in the fall because I could go get a snack while I was riding. Get a snack for my horse too. But we'd just go up and down the rows and up and down the rows. So I just kind of wanted to show that, you know, it may not be the most appealing place to do it, but you can do it. As I said, this isn't a huge plot of land for an endurance rider. It's definitely a huge plot of land for the hunter riders who I was sharing it with. But it's definitely possible to train without it. You kind of just have to commit to the time. You can put on some music. Bring a friend out, bring like 4 friends out and have them rotate, because they probably don't want to do the same thing that you want to do too, unless they're in the same situation. They're an endurance rider training for a 50 as well. So yeah, there's kind of all these creative ways to do it, and that's what I often do. Is I'll go onto Google anywhere that I'm going, or, you know, considering riding, I'll go and I'll Street View or Google Earth it, and I'll kind of look for these little opportunities too, right? You know, I can go back, let me share the screen again. You know, and you kind of have to consider, you know, where is the risk and where's the payoff? So actually just down here a road allowance, and so it's a nice
You knew he
long
was gonna
trail
do
that
it
goes all the way up to
eventually.
Quarry. But this is actually a very, very busy road too, right? So I would start looking for, you know, how can I cut through here without going on the road to get through here? Turns out this trail was full of mosquitoes anyway, so it wasn't really worth my time to do. And we actually just stuck to the rings there. But there's kind of a lot of just little mental hacks that you can do. As I said, bring music, have friends, you know, stop and take a break in the middle and, you know, cut it up into little pieces. It's easier to take it when you're doing little pieces than when you're trying to accomplish some big insurmountable task.
Yeah.
You can do it as interval training, right? You can say, okay, well, I'm going to do my laps, right? But I'm going to do, you know, 2 minutes of trot, and then I'm going to do 2 minutes of canter, and then I'm going to do 2 minutes of trot again, and I'm going to do 2 minutes of walk. And if you're constantly thinking about the next interval, then you're not thinking, oh my God, this is my 147th time around this same loop again, right? Maybe not 147, but so try to find ways to break it up into smaller pieces. Is really the best way that you can do it. Another thing I wanted to mention too is you really do have, once you start moving up, you really should be tracking your miles. You can't kind of just rely on we're going to ride 3 or 4 hour rides in the ring per week, or you know, we can't just multiply that by 2 to try to get it, because as I said, nobody's going to train in the ring 7 days a week, right? So you really have to get a better idea of how many miles you're actually putting on in each of the lessons. I have some lessons where I barely hit 5 kilometers in, because I'll put my GPS on for every single lesson. Karen will attest to that. Some of them I barely hit 5 kilometers, and then other ones I've cleared 10 easily, right? Depending on what we're working on.
Just doing ring work. Yeah. So you'd be surprised how much mileage you're putting on.
Absolutely.
The GPS drawings on your app afterwards are pretty amusing sometimes.
Yeah, so definitely start tracking it. And if you don't have a watch, you know, I've got mine here too. It's I broke the strap on it. I'm waiting for the repair kit to come in from Amazon. But I still keep it in my pocket and I track my miles. So once you get an idea of what the miles are, you have an idea of how many you need to add. General rule of thumb is up into 25 miles, you want to be doing the same amount in the week that you would do in your competition. So you would be looking to do 25 miles in a week. So if you know that you're doing 5 miles each time you're in the ring, you have to do another 10 somewhere else. 10 is actually a relatively easy 2-hour walk trot ride somewhere. And if you're looking around, you're looking at your Google Maps, you're saying, okay, I can go up and down these driveways or something here. It's not that much harder to be able to do that. As I said, you might have to get a little creative and give yourself some pep talks, but it can definitely be done. Yeah, I think that was kind of all I wanted to touch on. As I said, you don't need to have a GPS. There's plenty of apps on your phone that you can use. I know a lot of people use the Endomondo, and I think, is it Map My Run is also a pretty good one as well. But the GPSs, they're so good.
All trails will also, all trails will also give you distance at the very least.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to wrap up on. We do have one more question. It's more of a comment about the hills and how you would build the muscles on the back if you don't have hills.
Oh, right.
So again, the muscle building comes from the dressage. Maybe do you want to just do like another 2-minute, 60-second review on how the dressage builds up muscles in the back? Yeah.
Well, again, engine is in the back. So anytime you're asking the horse to engage his hindquarters and push forward and carry your weight and carry his own weight coming from the hindquarters, you're going to be improving the whole top line muscle. And it's about encouraging your horse to come forward from behind. So leg to hand, your legs engage that engine, you're pushing the horse forward. Then you're regulating how much forward you're getting at any particular time with your hands and with your body, with your half halts. And that's so the more work your horse does in a bit of a rounded frame, and again, it doesn't have to be full-on Grand Prix dressage horse, but something other than head in the air, back hollow, and hindquarters trailing. Okay, so you're encouraging some degree of roundness. You're good at line muscles, and the more you build up those top line muscles, the stronger your horse is going to be for carrying your weight over longer distances. And it's also going to give you a more pleasant horse to ride, a more educated horse to ride. And that over longer distances, that means you guys are going to be fighting with each other less, and the whole experience is going to be more pleasant.
Yeah.
So I think of dressage as kind of applied physics for trail horses.
That's beautiful. Let's finish it on that note, because I like that quote, and we have now fully cleared our hour and then a little bit. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for the great questions. Those were really good questions. I hope that this helped you out a little bit and help you understand why dressage is actually going to improve your performance on trail, and then maybe a couple little tips and tweaks that you can do to put a little bit more mileage on as well, to help with maybe your first ride or move up the levels as well. As I said at the beginning, this is recorded, so I am going to be posting it on YouTube for you guys all to see again and share. And if you have any questions as well, I will put Karen's contact on there as well.
Sure.
If you're interested in coming and getting some coaching done, join us on there. I know it's still going to be a little bit of time before we open back up again due to COVID. But if you've been inspired enough that you want to give dressage a little try, we are here for you. And as I said, that link will be down there.
It doesn't have to
post the stuff on YouTube. And we make it real good fun too, because we can go out in the Dufferin Forest afterwards as well. We do our half an hour of dressage, and then we go boogie in the forest.
Oh yeah, because there are only so many
we
circles.
Apply our skills. Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a great night.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys.